Please comment where you are watching from. We really want to know. The grand lobby of Fairview National Bank exuded sophistication. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the air carried the delicate aroma of polished wood and fresh flowers. Behind the counters, well-dressed tellers worked diligently, their polite smiles reserved for a clientele accustomed to impeccable service. At the far end of the lobby, enclosed in a glass-walled office, sat Susan Harding, the branch manager, who embodied professionalism in her tailored gray suit and perfectly styled hair. Her poised demeanor and cool composure were as much a part of the bank's image as its opulent decor. That afternoon, the tranquility of the lobby was subtly disrupted when Danielle Carter stepped through the revolving doors. Danielle was tall, poised, and dressed in a simple black dress paired with comfortable flats. Her natural hair was neatly styled, and she carried a sleek leather handbag that spoke of understated elegance and refined taste. Everything about her radiated style and class. Yet, as she walked through the lobby, Danielle couldn't help but notice a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Conversations quieted, and several heads turned, their lingering glances following her every step. Danielle's confident stride brought her to the information desk, where a young receptionist greeted her with a nervous smile. "Good afternoon, how can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her voice slightly tentative. In a friendly yet firm tone, Danielle replied, "Hi, I'm here to discuss opening a high-value account. I'd like to speak with the manager, please." For a brief moment, the receptionist's smile faltered. "Of course. Please wait here," she said, before quickly disappearing down the corridor toward Susan's office, her eyes darting back to Danielle, as if to confirm that she had indeed heard correctly. Within minutes, Susan Harding stepped out into the lobby. Her professional smile, though impeccably maintained, held a flicker of something else, a reserved, almost imperceptible judgment. "Hello, I'm Susan Harding, the branch manager. How can I help you today?" she asked, extending a hand. "Hi, I'm Danielle Carter," Danielle replied, her tone calm and confident as she shook Susan's hand. "I'm interested in opening a new account." Susan's handshake was brief and formal, her grip notably loose. "What type of account are you looking to open?" she inquired. "I recently liquidated some assets and I'm looking for a secure place to manage my funds," Danielle explained matter-of-factly. Susan's smile tightened imperceptibly. "I see," she said. "And may I ask the approximate value of the assets you're referring to?" Danielle's eyes remained steady. "Around $8 million. For an instant, Susan's eyebrows shot up in surprise before she quickly composed herself. "That's quite a sum," she remarked, her tone now laced with an undercurrent of skepticism. "Do you have documentation to support this?" Danielle reached into her sleek leather handbag and produced a neat folder containing bank statements, proof of sale for previous investments, and other relevant documents. Susan glanced briefly at the papers but made no move to examine them thoroughly. Instead, she folded her arms and said, "Miss Carter, I must be honest with you. Accounts of this size are usually handled through our private banking division. I'm not sure this branch can accommodate your needs." A frown tugged at the corners of Danielle's lips. "I was under the impression that this branch offers comprehensive services for all account holders, regardless of account size," she replied, her voice remaining composed though her eyes narrowed slightly. Susan's tone grew sharper. "We do, but we are very selective about the clients we take on. Maintaining accounts of such magnitude requires a certain level of mutual understanding and trust." Danielle's gaze hardened as she leaned in just a fraction. "Are you saying you don't trust me?" she asked quietly, the challenge clear in her tone. Susan's face flushed as she stammered, I didn't say that." There was a brief pause, heavy with unspoken implications. Danielle's expression remained unreadable for a moment before she continued, "I'd like to speak with someone higher up." Susan's lips pressed into a thin line as she replied, "I am the highest-ranking manager at this branch. There's no one else for you to speak with." A hush fell over the lobby for a split second, the tension between professionalism and personal bias hanging palpably in the air. At that moment, As the two women stood facing each other in the opulent surroundings, a question erupted in Danielle's mind, a question that encapsulated the injustice of the encounter and cut through the pretense of corporate decorum. How can we build trust and respect if we allow prejudice to dictate our actions? The question seemed to reverberate between them, challenging Susan's carefully maintained facade and hinting at the systemic issues lurking behind the bank's pristine veneer. Danielle's eyes searched Susan's for a sign of remorse or understanding, but all she saw was a flicker of discomfort and a retreat into rigid professionalism. Unsatisfied with the response and unwilling to let the matter rest, Danielle's tone grew even firmer. "I believe I deserve the same respect and service as any other client, regardless of how I look," she stated, her calm confidence now edged with quiet determination. "If you're unwilling to provide that, then I'll have no choice but to escalate this matter." Susan's response was immediate, a mixture of indignation and unease. "I assure you, Miss Carter, that our procedures are standard, and there's no need for escalation," she said, though her voice betrayed a hint of panic. Danielle simply nodded, her expression resolute. "Then I'll speak with someone at the corporate level. I expect fair treatment and transparency in all dealings." With that, she gathered her documents, adjusted her handbag, and turned toward the bank's exit, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with unspoken tension and a sense of impending change. As the grand doors closed behind her, the polished lobby of Fairview National Bank fell into a reflective silence. The subtle drama that had unfolded in that elegant space was more than just a personal conflict. It was a microcosm of a larger issue. Here, in the intersection of high finance and human dignity, the seeds of change were being sown. And as whispers of the incident began to circulate among the bank's staff, one question lingered in the air, a question that would soon resonate far beyond the marble halls of this institution. Will we let prejudice continue to define our interactions, or will we choose to embrace the dignity that every person deserves? In that moment, the elegant facade of the bank, with its glittering chandeliers and gleaming floors, could no longer hide the cracks in its foundation. The encounter between Danielle and Susan was a stark reminder that true sophistication isn't measured by opulence alone. It is defined by the respect and fairness extended to every individual. And as the day wore on, the ripple effects of that confrontation promised to spark a conversation about trust, accountability, and the real meaning of service in a world where appearances too often masked bias. Thus began a turning point, a day when a simple visit to a bank would set in motion events that might ultimately reshape not only the policies of Fairview National Bank, but also the broader conversations about inclusion and respect in the financial industry. And as voices both within and outside the bank started to speak up, the question posed in that charged moment echoed, inviting everyone to reflect on their own values and the true cost of prejudice. The next morning, the atmosphere outside Fairview National Bank was charged with an energy that felt both resolute and uneasy. Following the incident in the lobby, whispers of the confrontation had spread throughout the bank's corridors and beyond its marble walls. Danielle Carter, undeterred by the snide glances and hushed comments of yesterday, had made her decision. She would not allow prejudice to define her or dictate the service she deserved. With quiet determination, she prepared to take her battle to a higher level, one that reached beyond the polished branch to the very core of the institution. After leaving the bank with her documents clutched firmly in hand, Danielle took a cab to the corporate headquarters. During the ride, her mind replayed the earlier events, the piercing stares, the subtle shifts in tone, and the barely concealed disdain in Susan Harding's eyes. Though her initial shock had given way to a simmering resolve, she could not shake the feeling that what she had encountered was not an isolated incident, but a symptom of a deeper, systemic problem. In the quiet hum of the cab's engine, she rehearsed what she would say, determined that her experience would serve as a catalyst for change. Upon arriving at the sleek glass building that housed Fairview National Bank's corporate offices, Danielle was greeted by an assistant who led her into a modern conference room. The space was spacious, yet austere, a reflection of the bank's polished image. Soon, Michael Green, the regional director, entered the room. His expression was serious, and his eyes carried a weight of responsibility that spoke to the gravity of the matter at hand. "Miss Carter, thank you for coming in," Michael began as he extended a hand in greeting. "I want to sincerely apologize for your experience yesterday. What happened at our branch does not reflect our values as an institution." Danielle's tone remained calm, her voice steady, yet laced with quiet strength. "Thank you, Mr. Green. I appreciate your apology, but I believe that apologies alone will not remedy the deeper issues at play. What happened was not merely a misunderstanding, it was a clear manifestation of bias that has no place in a bank that prides itself on trust and respect." Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair in visible frustration. "You are absolutely right. I've already received several detailed complaints about the incident, and I want you to know that we are taking this matter very seriously. I assure you that steps will be taken to address this behavior and to prevent it from happening again." As Michael spoke, Danielle carefully placed her folder on the table, opening it to reveal the meticulously organized documents: bank statements, proof of assets, and most importantly, her own written account of the conversation with Susan Harding. "I want to open an account with Fairview National Bank," she stated clearly, "but I need assurance that your team is committed to creating a better environment for all clients, regardless of how they look or where they come from." Michael's expression hardened with resolve. "You have my word, Miss Carter. We are going to begin by addressing the behavior at the branch level. I will personally oversee mandatory training programs focused on diversity and customer service. We need to ensure that every client is treated with the respect and dignity they deserve." The conversation continued, moving from apologies to action. Michael explained that an internal review would be launched immediately. "Effective immediately," he said. "Susan Harding will be placed on administrative leave while we conduct a full review of her conduct. We cannot tolerate actions that compromise our reputation or disrespect our clients. I understand the importance of swift and decisive action." For a moment, the room fell silent. Danielle felt a mix of relief and lingering disappointment. Relief that the bank was taking her complaint seriously, and disappointment that such measures were necessary in the first place. Still, she pressed on. "I am not here to seek revenge, Mr. Green. I am here because I believe that Fairview National Bank can do better. My hope is that, through this process, we can build a model for fairness and accountability that sets a new standard in the industry." Michael nodded, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that spoke of commitment. "Your feedback is invaluable, Miss Carter. I will be taking steps not only to address this incident, but also to review our hiring and training policies to ensure that systemic bias is rooted out completely. Your experience has highlighted a critical flaw that we must correct if we are to maintain the trust of all our clients." Throughout the meeting, Danielle noted Michael's measured tone and careful choice of words. It was evident that he was aware of the larger implications of her case, not just for the bank, but for the industry as a whole. As the meeting drew to a close, Michael offered a final assurance. "We will keep you updated on the progress of the review and the changes we implement. I want you to feel confident that, going forward, Fairview National Bank will be a place where every client is valued." Leaving the corporate offices, Danielle felt a cautious hope beginning to stir within her. Though the road ahead was uncertain, her actions had ignited a spark, a challenge to the status quo that could not be easily ignored. Over the next few days, whispers of the incident spread throughout the bank's branches. Employees exchanged glances and murmurs as news of the administrative leave and the impending changes began to ripple through the institution. In the branch where the incident had occurred, the once proud lobby now seemed tinged with an air of regret. Tellers moved more quietly, and the usual confident smiles had been replaced by expressions of concern and introspection. Some employees, burdened by guilt and the realization of their own complicity, began to reflect on their actions and the culture that had allowed such discrimination to persist. The incident had not only shaken the foundation of the branch's reputation, but had also stirred something deeper, a collective questioning of long-held assumptions. During a late afternoon meeting in the branch's back office, one of the tellers, who had remained anonymous for fear of reprisal, whispered to a colleague, "What does it say about us if we let prejudice go unchecked? How can we truly serve our community if we refuse to see everyone as they deserve to be seen?" Her question hung in the air, a raw and honest challenge to the complacency that had long prevailed. At the height of this growing unrest, a climactic moment arrived. In a small, impromptu gathering in the branch's break room, an employee mustered the courage to speak up. "If we continue to allow discrimination to dictate our service, what will become of the trust that our community has placed in us?" The question, simple yet piercing, reverberated around the room and sparked a heated discussion among the staff. It was a moment of reckoning, one that forced each person present to confront not only their own biases, but also the systemic issues that had been allowed to fester for far too long. This pivotal question, if we continue to allow discrimination to dictate our service, what will become of the trust that our community has placed in us, became a rallying cry for change. It was a challenge to the existing order and a call to rebuild the foundation of respect and equality. As the discussion grew more passionate, even those who had been silent until now found their voices. They shared stories of clients who had been hurt by indifference, of opportunities lost to prejudice, and of the profound impact that genuine, unbiased service could have on a person's life. In the weeks that followed, Fairview National Bank began to see the first tangible signs of transformation. The internal review led to sweeping changes in branch policies, and new diversity training programs were rolled out with vigor. Employees at all levels were encouraged to share their experiences and insights, and management took steps to ensure that every client would receive the respect and service they deserved. Danielle Carter's case had become a powerful symbol, a reminder that accountability and change were not only possible but necessary. As the branch slowly began to regain its composure and rebuild its reputation, Danielle's determination continued to shine. Her willingness to stand up against injustice and to demand accountability had resonated far beyond the confines of a single bank lobby. It was a call to action for the entire financial industry, a call to reject discrimination in all its forms and to commit to the values of fairness and inclusivity. By the end of this turbulent period, the bank's leadership had come to recognize that true success was measured not only in profits, but also in the trust and dignity afforded to every client. And as conversations about bias and accountability became a permanent fixture in staff meetings and training sessions, a new era began to take shape at Fairview National Bank, one in which every individual was seen for who they truly were. In that pivotal moment of change, the question posed in that heated break room continued to echo in the minds of everyone involved. If we continue to allow discrimination to dictate our service, what will become of the trust that our community has placed in us? It was a question that would guide the bank's transformation and serve as a constant reminder of the true meaning of respect and accountability. Ultimately, the road to accountability was not an easy one. It demanded introspection, courage, and a commitment to change. But as the echoes of that defining question spread through the halls of Fairview National Bank, it became clear that the institution was ready to embrace a future built on equality, a future where every client, regardless of appearance, was given the dignity and respect they deserved. The branch's atmosphere had shifted imperceptibly at first, but now every corner of the lobby, every hushed whisper in the break room, and every furtive glance exchanged between colleagues spoke of a growing unrest. In the aftermath of Danielle Carter's bold visit and her meeting with Michael Green, the walls of Fairview National Bank's branch seemed to echo with questions about fairness, accountability, and what it truly meant to serve a community. Early one morning, as pale sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows, Joe, the branch manager, gathered the team for an urgent meeting in a small conference room behind the teller counters. The air was heavy with apprehension, yet there was a palpable sense of resolve. Employees sat in a tight semicircle around an old wooden table. Joe's voice, usually steady and reassuring, carried a rare edge of raw emotion. "Everyone," he began, pausing to meet the eyes of his colleagues, "I know we're all still reeling from what happened and what it might mean for us. But we can't ignore that this isn't just about one incident or one person. It's about our values and the trust our community has placed in us. We need to figure out how we move forward." A moment of silence followed, punctuated only by the soft hum of the overhead lights. Finally, Carla, one of the senior tellers, spoke up in a quiet yet determined voice. "We've been doing our jobs the right way. For years, our customers have come in not just for money management, but because they feel seen and cared for. How can we continue that tradition if we're forced to follow rules that strip us of who we are?" Her words resonated deeply with the group. A younger employee, Darren, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "It feels like we're caught between two worlds," he admitted. "On one hand, we have these corporate mandates, and on the other, there's the real world, the lives and dignity of the people we serve. I'm scared that if we lose this connection, we lose everything." The room grew quiet as each person grappled with the truth in Darren's words. Outside, the faint sound of traffic and distant chatter was a stark contrast to the heavy silence within those four walls. Joe continued, "I've spoken with Michael Green. He's promised us changes, mandatory diversity training, a review of our hiring practices, and a commitment to treating every client with respect. But those words won't mend the damage overnight. We need to show that our strength lies in our humanity." At that moment, a spark of defiance ignited in the eyes of several employees. The conversation veered toward a daring idea: organizing a community forum right here, at the branch. It would be a chance to hear directly from the clients who had supported them for years, a way to remind everyone from top executives to the frontline staff that true success was measured in human connection, not just in profit margins. As the meeting progressed, the tension that had been building for weeks finally reached its peak. In the back of the room, Sarah, another longtime employee, leaned forward and asked a question that cut through the murmur of subdued voices. "If we continue to allow discrimination and indifference to dictate our service, what will become of the trust that our community has placed in us?" For a long, charged moment, the question hung in the air. Eyes met and held, and then one by one, colleagues began to nod in silent agreement. It was a question that wasn't meant to shame, but to awaken. A call to action that demanded accountability not only from the bank's leadership, but from every individual who had a role in serving the public. After the meeting, as the team dispersed to resume their duties, Joe lingered in the conference room, staring at the blank wall as if searching for answers. The stark fluorescent light revealed the deep lines of worry on his face. In his heart, he knew that change was coming, whether he liked it or not. The old ways were no longer sustainable in a world that increasingly valued diversity, respect, and genuine human connection. Later that day, as the branch reopened its doors to a steady stream of customers, a subtle but unmistakable transformation had begun. The employees moved with a quiet determination. At the teller windows, smiles were offered not out of obligation, but with a renewed sense of purpose. Ryan, whose warm greeting had once been marred by the earlier incident, now exuded a calm confidence. When a regular client came in for a routine transaction, Ryan leaned in and said, "Good morning, Mr. Daniels. It's a pleasure to see you. How has your week been?" The genuine care in his tone hinted at a silent rebellion, a refusal to let corporate policies dictate the sincerity of his service. Throughout the day, subtle acts of solidarity emerged. In a quiet corner behind the lobby, Bill, whose decades of experience had long given him a quiet dignity, shared a knowing look with Carla as they restocked brochures for the upcoming community forum. Their exchange spoke volumes. No words were necessary when every gesture reaffirmed their commitment to the values that had once made the branch a haven of trust and warmth. Meanwhile, word of the employees' resolve began to seep beyond the bank's polished walls. A few loyal customers, having heard whispers of the internal meeting, started arriving with stories of their own. One elderly client, Mr. Franklin, approached the information desk with a thoughtful expression. "I've been banking here for over 40 years, he said softly, "and I remember when we all looked out for each other. I hope you'll find a way to keep that spirit alive." His words, simple yet profound, resonated with everyone who heard them. By mid-afternoon, the branch's energy had shifted from cautious apprehension to a more determined optimism. A small, impromptu team huddled together near the front counter to finalize the details of the community forum. They discussed logistics, how to invite clients, what questions to ask, and how to ensure that the event would not only be a platform for airing grievances, but also a celebration of the branch's legacy of care. Their voices, though soft, were filled with the conviction that change was not just possible, but imperative. As the workday drew to a close, the final act of that day's unfolding drama took shape in a quiet exchange between Joe and an anonymous teller who had stayed late to close out the day's transactions. "I worry," the teller confided in a hushed tone as they counted the day's receipts, "that if the higher-ups decide to enforce their policies too strictly, everything we've built here might vanish. It's not just about me, it's about all of us and the community we serve." Joe paused, his eyes reflecting a mixture of determination and sorrow. "I share your fear," he admitted, "but every change starts with a moment of courage. Today, we asked a question that might change everything. Tomorrow, we must continue to stand up for what we know is right." In the quiet that followed, the teller's voice broke through with one final, powerful refrain. "If we lose our humanity, then what are we really here for?" That question, echoing in the empty corridors of the branch, served as both a warning and a promise. A promise that they would not let their community's trust be squandered by prejudice or indifference. Outside, as dusk began to settle and the branch's neon sign flickered on, the employees locked up for the night with hearts heavier yet more hopeful than they had been in a long time. The events of the day, the impassioned meeting, the brave discussions, and the simple acts of kindness had ignited a spark that could not be easily extinguished. They knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. The corporate machine would not yield its grip without a fight, and there were likely to be setbacks as well as victories. But in that moment, as they stepped out into the cool evening air, each one carried with them the conviction that change was possible, that by standing together and asking the hard questions, they could reshape the very foundation of the bank. The question posed in that break room, lingering in every mind, became their clarion call. If we continue to allow discrimination and indifference to dictate our service, what will become of the trust our community has placed in us? It was a question that would drive them forward into the uncertain future, a future in which every act of kindness, every gesture of respect, would be a small but significant victory against a system that had long prized profit over people. And as the branch's doors closed behind them for the night, the promise of tomorrow shone like a distant beacon, a beacon of hope, accountability, and the unwavering belief that true success was measured not in numbers, but in the dignity of every human life. The morning after the tense meeting, a new energy was already stirring within the branch. Over the past few days, the hushed whispers and furtive glances had given way to determined conversations and quiet plans for change. The employees, led by Joe and inspired by the raw emotion of their recent gathering, had decided to host a community forum right there in the branch, a day when customers, staff, and local residents could come together to share their stories, air grievances, and reaffirm the true values that had once defined Fairview National Bank. In the early hours, before the branch opened its polished doors to the usual rush of business, a team of employees worked feverishly to transform the space. The conference room, once a sterile back office used solely for meetings and routine memos, was now adorned with handmade posters, string lights, and a simple banner that read, "Voices of the Community, Together We Rise." Bill, whose calm wisdom had long served as the branch's moral compass, took charge of setting up chairs in a circle, while Carla and Sarah arranged refreshments on a small table near the window. Their faces, usually reserved behind counters, now shone with a mix of determination and hope. Outside, the quiet hum of the city slowly began to merge with the gentle anticipation inside the bank. As the clock neared the start time of the forum, Joe took a moment to address his team. "We're not just here to follow orders anymore," he said softly, gathering the employees around him. Today is about us, our clients, and reclaiming the trust that's been lost. We have a chance to show everyone, management, our customers, even ourselves, that compassion and accountability can go hand in hand. Let's make this day count. By mid-morning, the branch's front lobby transformed into a welcoming entryway for community members. The polished marble floors and gleaming chandeliers, symbols of the bank's long-standing prestige, now seemed to serve as a stage for a more profound performance, the display of genuine human connection. Regular customers, some of whom had banked here for decades, began trickling in, drawn by word of mouth about the upcoming forum. Mr. Daniels, a kindly elderly gentleman who had become a fixture at the branch, was among the first to arrive. His face, etched with years of experience and quiet resilience, lit up when he saw the banner. "I remember a time when this bank felt like family," he murmured to himself as he made his way toward the meeting room. Inside the conference room, chairs filled quickly with a diverse group of people, clients, employees, and even a few local community leaders. The atmosphere was a blend of nervous excitement and solemn expectation. Joe stood at the front, beside a modest podium decorated with a single rose in a small vase. His voice, steady yet imbued with passion, cut through the low murmur as he addressed the assembly. "Thank you for coming today," Joe began, his eyes scanning the room. "We are here not as mere bank tellers and customers, but as a community united by trust, respect, and the belief that every individual deserves to be treated with dignity." He paused, letting his words sink in, then continued. "Recent events at our branch have exposed a painful truth, a truth that we must confront if we are to move forward. Today, I invite you all to share your experiences, your hopes, and your suggestions for how we can create an environment that values every human being." One by one, voices began to rise. A middle-aged woman, soft-spoken yet determined, recounted her own experience of feeling dismissed at a previous banking institution simply because of her accent. "I was made to feel less than when I came for assistance," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I believe that every person should be seen for who they truly are, not judged by superficial details." Her words resonated, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement from those present. Then, Mr. Daniels stood up slowly. His weathered hands gripped the edges of the podium as he addressed the gathering. "I've banked here for over 40 years, he began, his voice firm despite his age. "I remember when our bank wasn't just a place to store money. It was a place where we looked out for one another. I ask you all, if we lose that spirit of care and respect, what will become of the trust that has bound us together all these years?" His question echoed around the room, a challenge that stirred both silent reflection and audible assent. As the forum progressed, the discussions grew more animated. Employees shared stories of moments when a kind word or a small gesture had made a big difference. A teller who had stayed late to help a customer understand complicated paperwork. A receptionist who had gone out of her way to ensure an elderly client felt welcomed. Their accounts, recounted with a mix of pride and sorrow, underscored a simple truth: that true service could never be reduced to numbers or rigid protocols. At one point, a young customer, barely out of her teens, mustered the courage to speak. "I may not have years of experience," she said softly, "but I know what it feels like to be treated unfairly. We deserve to be seen as individuals, with our own stories and struggles. How can we build a future on trust if we allow biases to divide us?" Her words, laden with youthful idealism, seemed to capture the essence of the forum's purpose. In that moment, the room fell into a reflective hush, the weight of her question resonating deeply with everyone present. Throughout the afternoon, ideas flowed freely. Suggestions ranged from implementing regular sensitivity and diversity training to establishing a formal feedback mechanism where clients could share their experiences anonymously. Many attendees spoke about the need for accountability at all levels, urging the bank to hold not only individual employees, but the entire system responsible for fostering an inclusive environment. A recurring theme emerged. That change could only come from a collective effort, one that required both courage and compassion. Toward the climax of the forum, as the energy in the room reached a fevered pitch, a respected local community advocate named Angela Martinez took the stage. With a calm yet authoritative tone, she posed a question that cut to the very core of the discussion. If we continue to allow discrimination and indifference to dictate our service, then what will become of the legacy of trust that has sustained us for generations? The question hung in the air like a challenge. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The silence was charged with meaning. Then, one by one, people began to affirm her sentiment with nods and murmurs. It was as if that single question had crystallized all the hopes, fears, and aspirations of everyone in the room. Angela continued, "We have the power to redefine what it means to be a bank in this community, to transform our institutions from places of exclusion into havens of equality and respect. It starts with each of us, here and now. Let's commit to a future where every client is seen, heard, and valued." As the forum drew to a close, the atmosphere was transformed. What had begun as an outpouring of raw emotion had evolved into a tangible blueprint for change. In the closing remarks, Joe promised that the feedback gathered would be compiled into a comprehensive report to be presented to the bank's corporate leadership. "Your voices matter," he declared. "Today, we have taken the first step toward reclaiming the heart of our institution. Let this be the start of a new chapter, one built on respect, accountability, and genuine human connection." Outside the building, as attendees mingled and exchanged heartfelt farewells, a sense of renewed hope permeated the air. Customers, employees, and community members alike left with a shared understanding that change was not only necessary but possible when voices united for a common cause. The bank's facade of pristine opulence now seemed to shimmer with the promise of authenticity, a promise that beneath the gleaming marble and crystal chandeliers, the real strength of Fairview National Bank lay in its people. Later that evening, as the branch's lights dimmed and silence settled over its corridors once more, Joe lingered by the empty conference room. He allowed himself a rare moment of introspection, feeling the weight of the day's events. The passionate questions, the shared stories, and the unwavering resolve of the community had ignited something powerful. A spark that could transform not just a branch, but an entire institution. In that quiet moment, Joe reflected on Angela Martinez's climactic question, one that now echoed in his own heart. If we continue to allow discrimination and indifference to dictate our service, then what will become of the legacy of trust that has sustained us for generations? He knew that the answer to that question would determine the future of Fairview National Bank, and, by extension, the future of every person who relied on it for more than just financial security. As the night deepened, the community forum's impact lingered like a warm ember in the darkness, a beacon of change in a world too often defined by indifference. And with each passing moment, it became clearer that the journey toward true accountability and inclusion had only just begun. The day after the community forum, a palpable sense of change filled the air at Fairview National Bank's branch. As dawn broke over the city, the once quiet corridors now hummed with a determined energy. Employees arrived early, their expressions a mixture of hope and trepidation. The events of the previous day had not only stirred up raw emotions but also ignited a fire for reform. While many still carried the scars of yesterday's confrontation, they also felt the promise of a new beginning, a future where accountability and respect would redefine their work. Inside the branch, Joe, the branch manager, called for a follow-up meeting in the small conference room that had hosted the community forum. The room, still adorned with remnants of the previous day, handmade posters, a faded banner reading, "Together we rise," and a scattering of empty coffee cups, now served as a temporary war room for change. Joe's voice, usually measured and calm, resonated with urgency as he addressed his team. "Everyone," he began, leaning forward so his words reached every corner of the room. "Yesterday we heard the voices of our community, and we witnessed a united call for fairness. Today we have a responsibility to turn that call into action. We must implement changes that honor our commitment to every client and every member of our team." Carla, whose voice had once carried soft reassurances to customers, spoke up. "I've been thinking about what was said. We need a clear plan, one that not only addresses the issues but also gives us the tools to make sure this doesn't happen again. It's not enough to feel sorry. We must act." Darren, still visibly anxious but eager to contribute, added, "Some of us are worried that these changes might threaten the structure we're used to, but I believe that true strength comes from adapting and learning. We have an opportunity to redefine what service means here." Joe nodded in agreement, and the conversation shifted toward practical measures. The group discussed ideas ranging from enhanced diversity and sensitivity training to establishing a confidential hotline for employees to report discriminatory behavior without fear of retaliation. They also resolved to compile a formal report that documented both the community's feedback from the forum and their own internal observations. This report would be sent to corporate headquarters as evidence of the urgent need for systemic change. Meanwhile, whispers of the branch's internal transformation began to ripple outward. Loyal customers, who had attended the forum and witnessed the impassioned discussions among the staff, started to speak up in their own right. Mr. Daniels, a venerable client who had banked at Fairview National for decades, shared his thoughts with a group of regulars outside the branch one morning. "I've seen banks come and go," he said in a low, measured tone. "But I believe that a place like this, where people are willing to fight for respect, has a chance to lead by example. We must ask ourselves, what kind of future do we want to build for our community?" As the day progressed, corporate news began to trickle in. Michael Green, the regional director who had met with Danielle Carter just days before, had issued a statement promising sweeping changes. In an official memo sent to all branches, he affirmed that diversity training and stricter accountability measures would be implemented immediately. The memo also noted that all managerial staff would be required to attend a series of workshops designed to foster a more inclusive and empathetic customer service approach. Though the memo was formal and measured in tone, it sent shockwaves through the branch, signaling that the higher-ups were taking the matter seriously. At the branch that afternoon, the atmosphere was electric with cautious optimism. The employees, now armed with the promise of change from above and bolstered by their own grassroots initiatives, set about preparing the formal report. Bill and Carla gathered testimonies from colleagues and even recorded brief video interviews with several tellers and customer service representatives. Each story was a reminder of the daily acts of kindness, and in some cases the painful moments of exclusion that had defined their work for far too long. During a quiet moment, as the team huddled around a battered laptop in the break room, Sarah, one of the more reflective voices among them, voiced a question that had been building in her mind. If we are to truly transform this institution, then we have to ask ourselves a hard question. What will become of the trust that our community has placed in us if we continue to tolerate even the smallest acts of discrimination? Her question fell into a heavy silence before, one by one, her colleagues began to murmur their agreement. It was a question that resonated deeply, a challenge to both the past and the future. The significance of Sarah's inquiry was not lost on anyone. It encapsulated the stakes of their struggle, a struggle for dignity, accountability, and the preservation of a legacy built on mutual respect. As the day wore on, the formal report began to take shape. The document was comprehensive, detailing the events that had led to the community forum, the voices that had spoken out, and the collective commitment of the branch's employees to uphold a higher standard of service. The report was interspersed with quotes, personal testimonies, and even photographs from the forum, each element a testament to the branch's determination to change. Joe supervised the final edits with a solemn pride, aware that this report was more than just a grievance. It was a blueprint for a better future. By late afternoon, the completed report was sent off to corporate headquarters with an accompanying letter from Michael Green, who had been copied on the communication. The letter promised that the issues raised would be reviewed promptly and that concrete actions would be taken to ensure that every client received the dignity they deserved. Outside, as customers continued to filter in for routine transactions, the branch took on an air of quiet resolve. Regulars greeted one another with knowing smiles, and even new faces seemed to sense that something important was unfolding here. A young woman waiting in line at the teller window remarked to the person beside her, "It feels different today, like we're on the cusp of something good." Her words, though simple, captured the hope that had begun to spread throughout the community. As the closing time neared, Joe gathered the team once more. "Today, we have taken a significant step," he said, his voice both exhausted and uplifted. "We've shown that when we stand together and speak out, our voices can create ripples that reach even the highest echelons of our institution. But our work is not finished. The report is just the beginning. We must remain vigilant and committed to ensuring that every promise of change is kept." In that final moment before the branch's doors were locked for the night, the employees paused to reflect on the day's events. Their hearts were buoyed by the knowledge that they had initiated a shift that began in the faces of those who had dared to ask the hard question, "What will become of the trust that our community has placed in us?" That question, echoing in every mind, became both a rallying cry and a reminder of the responsibility they bore. As the last light was turned off and silence reclaimed the polished halls, the promise of reform lingered like a soft glow. The journey toward accountability and true inclusion was long and fraught with challenges, but in that small branch of Fairview National Bank, the winds of change had begun to blow. And with each act of kindness, each honest conversation, and every shared vision of a fairer future, the institution moved one step closer to realizing the legacy of trust its community so deeply deserved. The morning light revealed a branch transformed. In the days since the report had been sent to corporate headquarters, whispers of reform had given way to tangible actions. The familiar gleam of marble and crystal in the lobby now carried a hint of renewed purpose, and even the air seemed charged with cautious optimism. Employees arrived with a new spring in their step, determined to see the change they had fought for take root. At the start of the day, Joe, the branch manager, convened a meeting in the conference room, a room that had once borne witness to impassioned discussions and a community forum. Today, it was the center of planning for the next phase of reform. Chairs were arranged in a circle, and the walls were decorated with freshly printed posters outlining the new policies approved by headquarters. The posters emphasized respect, inclusivity, and accountability, serving as constant reminders of the bank's commitment to change. Joe began, his tone both earnest and hopeful. "I want to thank each of you for your bravery and your willingness to stand up for what's right. Our report has been reviewed by corporate, and I'm pleased to share that they are moving forward with comprehensive training programs and new diversity policies. We are no longer just a branch. We're the starting point of a new chapter for Fairview National Bank." A ripple of relief and excitement passed through the room. Carla, who had long shouldered the quiet burden of witnessing injustice, allowed herself a small smile. "It feels like our voices have finally been heard," she said softly, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of gratitude and determination. Darren, still remembering his anxious moments during the previous days, added, "I'm relieved, but also a bit scared. Change is hard, and sometimes it means confronting parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. But I believe that if we work together, we can rebuild trust, not just with our clients, but within ourselves as well." Outside the meeting, the branch buzzed with activity. New training sessions were scheduled for the coming weeks, and management had established a confidential hotline for reporting discrimination or bias. Michael Green's memo had also promised regular follow-ups and open forums with employees at every level, ensuring that the changes would not remain just words on a page. These measures were meant to heal old wounds and prevent any future injustice from taking root. In the midst of the bustling lobby, Ryan greeted customers with his characteristic warmth, yet there was now an added depth to his smile. Each interaction seemed to carry a renewed sense of purpose. A middle-aged client, Mr. Daniels, stepped up to the counter. Noticing the subtle change, Ryan leaned forward and said, "Good morning, Mr. Daniels. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? How can I help you today?" Mr. Daniels, his eyes crinkling with a smile, replied, "It certainly is, Ryan. It feels like there's something different here today, like we're all working together for something better." The genuine exchange spoke volumes. The community was beginning to sense the winds of change. Later in the afternoon, as the branch settled into its new rhythm, a special training session was held in the main conference room. A well-respected diversity and inclusion expert had been invited from headquarters to speak with the employees. In the softly lit room where chairs had been arranged in a semicircle and a projector cast images of diverse communities across the screen, the expert began by sharing her own story of overcoming bias and building bridges across cultural divides. "Every interaction we have is an opportunity," she explained, her voice clear and measured. "An opportunity to honor the dignity of the person before us and to create a ripple effect that extends far beyond a single transaction. Today, I want to ask you all a question. Will we allow the old prejudices to define our future? Or will we stand together to ensure that every individual who walks through these doors is met with respect and compassion?" The question hung in the air, stirring a moment of thoughtful silence. Employees exchanged glances, and several nodded slowly, as if the question had reached a deep, unspoken part of their hearts. It was a moment of collective introspection, a turning point where each person had to decide how they would contribute to a future free from discrimination. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner near the lobby, Sarah gathered with a small group of employees to reflect on the changes unfolding around them. "I've been thinking about all we've been through," she said softly. "Our branch has always prided itself on the personal connections we make, but we've seen how fragile that trust can be. Now, with these reforms, we have a real chance to redefine our culture. We have to ask ourselves, what will become of the trust our community has placed in us if we ever fall back into old habits?" Her question resonated powerfully with those gathered. It was both a challenge and a promise, a reminder that trust, once broken, must be carefully nurtured back into existence. One of her colleagues, an employee who had witnessed firsthand the hurt caused by bias, responded, "It will only be rebuilt if we remain vigilant and truly embody the changes we're making. This isn't just about new rules. It's about who we are and what we stand for." As the day wore on, word of the branch's progress began to spread. Social media posts from loyal customers highlighted the visible changes, the friendly greetings, the respectful interactions, and even the new posters emphasizing inclusivity. "I've been a customer here for over 30 years, one post read, "and today I felt like I was part of something important. I believe in this bank because I see the genuine care in every smile." By late afternoon, corporate headquarters sent a follow-up communication that was shared with all branches. The memo praised the initiatives at Fairview National Bank as a model for how a financial institution could transform itself through commitment to diversity and inclusion. It was a moment of external validation, a sign that the efforts made at the branch were not going unnoticed. Yet, even as the branch celebrated these milestones, not everyone was completely at ease. In a quiet meeting later that evening, a group of longtime employees gathered in the break room to discuss what the future might hold. "I'm happy about the changes," said one employee, his voice low and reflective. "But we must remember that change isn't a one-time event. It's a continuous effort. We need to hold ourselves accountable every day." Another chimed in, "Absolutely. It's not enough to have training sessions and policies on paper. We need to see these values in action, through every interaction, every decision we make." Their words underscored the understanding that the journey toward a truly inclusive environment was ongoing, a process that required commitment, self-reflection, and constant vigilance. In that moment, the branch's new identity was being forged. The walls of the bank, once symbols of unyielding tradition, now served as a canvas for the evolving story of trust and renewal. The employees, inspired by the reforms and the collective vision of a better future, pledged to hold each other accountable. They agreed to meet regularly to discuss progress and share experiences, ensuring that the momentum of change would not fade with time. As the day drew to a close, Joe stood by the front doors, watching as the last customers departed. He felt a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. The branch had weathered a storm of controversy and emerged stronger, its foundation now built on the shared commitment to fairness and respect. In the fading light, he took a moment to reflect on the journey so far. A final thought echoed in his mind, one that encapsulated the challenge and the promise of their collective efforts. Will we allow our renewed commitment to stand as a beacon of hope, or will we let old habits reclaim their hold on us? That question, posed in the quiet twilight, was both a challenge and a promise. It was a call to action for every individual at Fairview National Bank, a reminder that the legacy of trust depended on their daily choices, their interactions, and their unwavering dedication to the principles of equality and compassion. As the doors closed and the lights dimmed, the branch settled into a reflective calm. The winds of change had begun to blow through its corridors, carrying with them the hope of a new era. And with every new day, the promise of a fairer, more inclusive future grew ever stronger. A future where every client and every employee would be seen, heard, and valued for who they truly are.